Roger, you can sit. Yeah. No, Roger's asking. Yeah, we took it off anyway from the wall.
Okay. Family and friends and extended family via live stream, I'd like to welcome everyone. We are going to begin the funeral service for Mrs. Betty M. Soren. Family, if you have a cell phone, I'd like you to place it into silent mode at this time or turn it completely off. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Adam Shalom from Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation.
Our service will begin today with one of Betty's great loves. In fact, two of Betty's great loves at the same time. One is classical music, and the other is her grandchildren. In this case, we will hear the Bach Suite No. 4 Saraband, played by her daughter, Hannah Soren, on the cello. Music was a great connection between Hannah and her grandmother, with that instrument connection between the two of them, and so we begin our service with beautiful music.
I tested it. I'm going to do this.
Well, as Betty might have said, we're doing the best that we can. We'll come back to the music later in our service today. And so I'll begin my remarks with a short poem by the Israeli poet Yehudah Amichai. It's a poem titled Shir Hallel, which means a song of praise. And in this case, the praise is for what is most important with us in this life, in this world, and with each other. I'll read the poem first in Hebrew and then in English. Shir Hallel. אני רוצה לשיר שיר הלל לכל מה שנשאר פה איתנו, ולא עוזב ולא נודד כציפורי הנדוד, ולא בורח צפונה ולא דרומה, ולא שר ליבי במזרח ואנוכי בקצה מערב. אני רוצה לשיר לעצים שאינם משליכים את עליהם, וסובלים להט קיץ וקור חורף, ולבני אדם שאינם משליכים את זיכרונותיהם, וסובלים יותר מבני אדם שמשליכים הכל. אבל מעל הכל, אני רוצה לשיר שיר הלל לאוהבים שנשארים יחדיו לשמחה ולצער ולשמחה, לעשות בית, לעשות ילדים, עכשיו ובעונות האחרות. Song of Praise by Yehudah Amichai. I want to sing a song of praise to all that remains here with us, and does not leave, and does not wander like the migrating birds, and does not flee to the north and not to the south, and does not sing, my heart is in the east and I am at the edge of the west. I want to sing to the trees that do not throw out their leaves, and withstand the blaze of summer and the cold of winter, and to those people who do not throw out their memories, and withstand more than those people who throw out everything. But above all, I want to sing a song of praise to lovers who remain together for joy and for pain and for joy, to make a home, to make children, now and for the other seasons. And so now we return to the Bach suite played by M Soren. What can one say at the death of Betty Soren? The last 2 years were challenging. The last few months were awful. 90 years is not young, but she still had more time left before COVID struck. There was more music to listen to. There were more smiles and hugs to give. There were certainly more cake and more cookies to eat. Yes, we can eat them in her memory, but it will not be the same. Our goal today is to try to see the larger picture, to get some distance, some perspective, and some understanding. To think of her life like a good meal or a wonderful concert. Like everything good, it must come to an end. But we carry with us the wonderful tastes, the beautiful memories, the meaningful memories of a great experience. Betty loved the theater, musicals and stage plays and opera. She was an early and regular subscriber to the Writers' Theater in Glencoe, and even later in life, when she didn't drive at night anymore, she would drive to her close friend Barbara's house, and then they would take the L train to the city for a show. They would get a ride back with Barbara's husband. She would spend the night for a bed and breakfast, and then go home. And there was also the Lincolnshire Marriott Theater, the Citadel Theater in Lake Forest, and of course, the Shakespeare Festival in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Even in her days at Sedgebrook, Betty would find shows she wanted to go to and would organize a trip for the residents. Perhaps we can think of the story of her life as a play in 5 acts. For those here in person who are cold outside, don't worry, there will be no intermission in this play. Act 1, Betty's Beginnings. She was born in Chicago in 1930 to Ruth and Benjamin Rosen. Her mother had been born in Chicago, while her father was born in Mogilev, Russia, in the Russian Empire. And he immigrated to the United States at age 12. Ben always retained an accent that Betty claimed he didn't have. After a few years sewing in a clothing factory, Ben served as a cook in the Navy, which got him a start in the restaurant business. He would run the kitchen, and Ruth would run the front of the restaurant. One example of a long-running restaurant of theirs was the Oriole Tea Room, and they also ran a cafeteria in a factory for a time. Because of their hours doing breakfast and lunch, they weren't home when the kids went to school or got home, though sometimes the kids would come by the restaurant and hang out near the bakery case hoping for a cookie. You can see a theme developing here. Betty had a great memory for dessert details, and supposedly at age 6 she once said, "I'd kill for a good cookie." The nuclear family was small. It was just Ben and Ruth and Betty's older sister Lorraine. But Betty was very close with her cousins, which gave her the feel of a large extended family. Because she was 4 years older and their parents were working, Lorraine was sometimes stuck watching her kid sister Betty, but that doesn't mean they only stayed at home. They'd take the streetcar and the L train to spots in the city. Lorraine would get off at one stop and tell Betty to get off at the next stop for her class. Going to the movies, sometimes they saved the 3 cents for the streetcar fare to have money for candy. There was the time that Lorraine and Betty and their cousin Perry were at the beach. Lorraine and Perry were on the beach. Betty was, of course, in the water swimming, having started swimming around age 2, and she might have been 4 in this story. At one moment, Lorraine and Perry looked up, and Betty was gone. She had swum down the coastline. People remembered having seen her and seen her keep swimming, and they never caught up with her. It took Ben and Ruth to find her later. Or there was the time that Lorraine wanted to sneak out to a party rather than stay home and watch Betty, so she told Betty, "You do what you want," and she went out for the party. It turns out what Betty wanted to do was to bake, and so the kitchen was covered in sugar and flour, and she went over to the neighbors to ask them for help lighting the oven. Well, they sent a message to Ben and Ruth and let them know. There is no record that we know of Lorraine's punishment for this. Act 1, Betty's Beginnings, is set on the north side of Chicago in Rogers Park, where she grew up, where she went to Senn High School, and where she returned after college. It also includes a Jewish education through Sunday school and confirmation, and the family once ran a kosher deli restaurant, even though theirs was not a kosher household. Of course, even in this stage of the play, there's a soundtrack. Even in high school, Betty was in band and orchestra and very social. She always played the oboe, a lifelong love. And that soundtrack continued when she went to college, which is the beginning of Act 2. Act 2 is University and United in Marriage. Betty's sister Lorraine had attended the University of Illinois, but when Betty arrived to start her freshman year, there was a problem. She hadn't thought to arrange housing for herself in advance. She wound up finding a house with a few other women and threw herself into college social life. It seemed like she never missed a dance, and there was always a picture. She was a bit of a photography buff, mostly of people, and she often had her camera with her, so there are many albums of these memories left today. It's also where she met Barbara, a lifelong friend. She was looking for a date for her boyfriend's friend and just walked into Barbara's room and asked her to join them. Betty was also involved in the college band for a year, though it looks like from the picture she was the only woman involved. For part of her college, she even had her own apartment, which was a bit risque for 1950, but it shows she was always an independent-minded woman. And that independent-mindedness extended to her family and their choices. In 1949, as Betty was starting college, Her sister Lorraine married Mel, an African-American man from Evanston she had met at school. Their parents disowned Lorraine for this. The public stance was it was because she had married outside the faith. But Betty attended the wedding, even though she had to sneak out of the house to be able to attend the wedding. And even after Lorraine and Mel moved to New York City, Betty maintained a loving connection with them, even as she stayed connected with her parents. It was a delicate balancing act, but it was also a real demonstration of how important family was to Betty and how she could get along with everyone. Betty finished her degree at the University of Illinois in education and began teaching at Gowdy Elementary School in the era when there were 48 children per classroom. And we move on to the other important scene in Act 2. It's called University and United in Marriage, and this is her connection with Marshall. Barbara and her husband had double dated with Betty and some others, but this one was the keeper. Betty was friends with Marshall's law partner, who had gone to the University of Chicago Law School with him, and also created a decades-long work partnership. They met at a party, but Marshall's joke was that he had a better recollection of how he met his law partner than how he met his wife. Betty and Marshall had a lot in common. They both grew up in Chicago North Side Jewish communities. They both loved music, because Marshall played the clarinet, and they were both younger siblings. They were married July 3rd of 1957. And for that era, they were a bit older, and they were ready to settle down. After 2 years of marriage, the first child, Brad, arrived, but that's the beginning of Act 3. Act 3 of 5, Motherhood. As one of Betty's daughters-in-law said, she saw her most important job in life was her family, raising her 4 children. And the fact that she wound up with 4 kids who are good and caring people who also get along with each other means that she did her job well. It was challenging when they were small and only 2 years apart, but once they were grown up, it was great. There was first Brad, and then Roger, and then Ken, and finally Nancy, because she wanted one more chance to have a girl. The family started at an apartment on Farwell, and then moved to Lakewood, where they grew to 3 boys, and finally to Glencoe by the time Nancy was born, and where they stayed for the next 40 years. 4 kids was a lot, but Betty did a good job of letting things go when she needed to. There might be kids climbing down the back of the house, or experimenting with sending one of them down the laundry chute. Roger was rambunctious, and Ken was quiet but mischievous. Betty had taken the maternity leave offered by the Board of Education, which she renewed every 2 years until Nancy to keep her options open. While they were still in Chicago, she had her parents and extended family to help, but Glencoe was a little further away. And when she finally did have a girl, Betty could put her sewing skills to use too. She'd already made her own dresses, and now she made them for Nancy too, including a few twin outfits for the 2 of them. She learned from patterns and just doing it, but that also helped her make Halloween costumes and special birthday parties, which created great memories. Betty was also very involved in whatever her children wanted to do. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, Roger's horseback riding lessons, and of course, music lessons, sometimes in 4 different places. She and Marshall had hoped for a home quintet, but Brad preferred the oboe like his mother, and like her, he also plays in community orchestra. But there was also piano and cello and French horn and guitar and saxophone and bassoon, though electric guitar or drums were perhaps a step too far. Betty was very proud of her family's musical achievements, especially Roger's position with the Colorado Symphony, though there were limits. Nancy had to stop practicing singing when Marshall came home on the same train every day. And as for Ken's French horn, well, sometimes he was encouraged to be done with practicing and watch TV instead. And then there were the family outings to musicals and opera. It was something she loved that she wanted to share with them. There were other destinations too. Marshall Field's Christmas displays, including sitting on Santa's lap, even though there was absolutely no Christmas at home and they were told to keep it a secret. And the Lincoln Park Zoo, Hawthorne Melody Farms, and Kittyland. And every summer they were regulars at Glencoe Beach, so often that the guards at the swimming beach and the boat launch both knew her. She always loved swimming and boating. The family had a sunfish sailboat, which she taught them each how to assemble and to sail, and they also took vacations to nearby state parks. Once the Illinois Beach State Park in Zion was the destination. It seems like not that far away, but 4 kids in a car makes anything seem far away. That love of swimming and love of the beach would extend in later years to time with her grandchildren, but we'll come to that in Act 5. In between, there is Act 4, her individuality as a person. As a mother, Betty gave her kids everything they needed, and she also had many activities for her own interests. She was an active and able gardener in her large home garden with roses and other flowers, and she was very involved in the Glencoe Garden Club. She also loved the Chicago Botanic Gardens when it opened, and every year since, I think she still has a membership. Even in later days at Sedgebrook, she kept her own garden plots, first on the ground and then standing as she was able, and always had lots of plants in her place. She was also on the board of the library, the League of Women Voters, and of course community orchestras in Deerfield and then closer to home. Sometimes the kids were brought along to meetings or to exercise classes until they were old enough to be left alone at home together. Marshall and Betty also made time for just the two of them by taking vacations twice a year to refresh their partnership. Their honeymoon had involved traveling all over Canada, and over time the trips became bigger, sometimes with couples, sometimes on their own, to London, to Mexico City, to Peru, to Honduras, Scandinavia, and Italy. And they went out every Saturday night without the kids on a date night. It was good for both of them. They got to dress up to go out, and the kids got some ice cream. That individuality also extended to their family's Jewish choices. Both Marshall and Betty wanted something less conventional that matched their values, and they found it at the North Shore School of Jewish Studies, held at the Jewish Community Center in Skokie. It was a secular Jewish community that emphasized understanding your heritage and culture and the ethics of being a good human being, separate from religion. All four kids attended from first grade all the way through ninth, and many stayed working as teachers' aides or driving their siblings there. There were regular celebrations of Hanukkah and Passover at school and at home, although Rosh Hashanah was more about apple picking, and Yom Kippur was a day to avoid doing normal things like shopping. And of course, there was Jewish food at all the holidays, knishes and mandelbread and babka, though if they had been made ahead of time and stored in the freezer, they could be raided by the kids occasionally. Theirs was also a socially engaged Jewishness, engaged in the causes of the day, including reaching out socially to the more isolated African American community within Glencoe. Once their youngest kids were in high school, Betty decided she wanted to go back to work. And so she took up work as a part-time bookkeeper for 2 or 3 different businesses over the years. The best fit was Dan Music and Sound, a guitar and keyboard shop, of course. She had taken accounting classes at Oakton Community College, and she was a smart person who did well in school, even though she was humble about it. And it kept her busy around her new responsibilities as a grandmother. And that takes us to our last act, to Act 5, Grandma and the Move. Marshall and Betty were very welcoming to the people their children brought home to marry. Of course, she had known Joanne, Barbara's daughter, forever, but she was also very welcoming to Angela and to Debbie and to Neal. Angela was especially grateful that her background, having been raised Catholic in the South, was never an issue, and of course providing grandchildren was a very big plus. Alyssa and Hannah and Kayla and Alexa and Sami and Emma and Sarah and Ben and Lily all have their unique memories of their grandmother and their time with her. They would stay over at her place when possible. They would get a meal, sometimes breakfast with cereal and turkey bacon, and of course go swimming at the beach or in the pool. There was always peach Snapple available as well, and sometimes Ben and Lily would come along with her to water volleyball games to help put the balls back in the pool. And lots of card games and just talking and spending quality time together. Betty even softened on her opposition to pets, beginning to like her granddogs through her children and their families. There were many trips to Louisville, including being at the hospital when she became a grandmother with Alyssa's birth, and for birthdays and special events until there were too many grandkids to do it with everyone. There are many pictures of the kids with their grandparents, and she loved having them. They both loved having them around. And Betty was also a good parent to her adult children as parents, never meddling or imposing on them or telling them what to do. Grandma and the move? Well, the move was the major change in scenery. From the Glencoe house to Sedgebrook, as Marshall's mobility issues and caregiving needs became more serious. After their 50th anniversary party in 2007 at their house in Glencoe, it became clear it was time to move, and they settled on Sedgebrook. When her husband had to move to the nursing care facility, she visited him there and had lunch together there every day, even once hitching a ride on a snowplow during a snowstorm to make it. She held his hand, she comforted him, she let him complain about the food if he wanted to complain about the food. His death in 2012 was very hard on her, of course, but life went on. She continued to swim, she did very well at the Sedgebrook Olympics, and she found she had a lot to do there. She made new friends, she sang in the chorus, she tried ukulele classes and Spanish lessons, participated in the Jewish club and the bridge club, And then those outings to performances in the theater. She even organized a book club and made sure that they always had the books they needed from the library. The picture on her memorial page online and on our service booklet here is of her holding an oboe in one hand and a brownie in the other when she attended a rehearsal near her 85th birthday. She continued playing the oboe well into her 80s, not easy with limits on breath control as you get older. She never lost her sense of direction. Even once when her daughter-in-law Debbie was taking her to the hospital after a fall, she was giving directions from the back seat. She didn't want her kids to worry about her, especially Brad, and hers was a gradual decline that she managed very well, always following doctor recommendations, adjusting to the new normal from slowing down to walker to wheelchair. As she wrote in a 2016 calendar, "I'm doing the best I can." Her attitude was good. She processed the challenges through journaling and talking when needed, and she was generally happy and enjoyed the company of others. And she never complained, never felt sorry for herself, and she trusted her children to help her make the right decisions. And now, today, the curtain has fallen, the performance is over, and the applause for a role well played, a life well lived, echoes in our ears. Every performance, every daughter and spouse and mother and grandmother is unique, but Betty Soren played her roles very well indeed. Our show must go on, but we are made better and richer and wiser for having known her, having experienced her life and her role in our lives, and seeing that a life well lived is indeed a work of art. I want to conclude my remarks with a poem by Juanita DeLong entitled My Hereafter. Do not come when I am dead to sit beside a low green mound, or bring the first gay daffodils because I love you so, for I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the limpid river. I will warm your work-glorified hands through the glow of winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness to the drop, drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters. I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin or the oboe, and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with the flaming radiance of the sunrise and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy, that are part of me. I shall become part of them. To conclude these remarks, we end as we began with the beauty of classical music, in this case, a Mozart quartet for oboe, violin, viola, and cello, recorded by the Fine Arts Quartet in 1959. I would now like to ask Betty's sons Ken and then Brad to come forward to share a few stories.
Hello, I'm Ken Soren, Betty's third of her 4 children, and I want to share a few stories about my mom. For a girl raised in apartments or 3 flats in Chicago, my mom experienced an outdoor life growing up. My mom loved time with her aunts and cousins and sister Lorraine, not only in Chicago, but in summers staying for weeks in southern Michigan in cabins or tents. She also had fond memories of spending time with her dad fishing in Lake Michigan or him taking her horseback riding in Lincoln Park. My mom loved swimming and sailing, as you heard, and she also gave us a love for the Glencoe Beach. She would take us multiple times a week to the Glencoe Beach, and we'd set up a good spot in the sand, and she'd play with us either in the water or in the sand, and over time we learned to swim and to sail, and Mom, as you heard, continued to swim throughout her life. It brought special joy to her as we learned to swim and as she got to see her grandchildren learn to swim both in Lake Michigan and later at Sedgebrook. Typical of families in the 1960s and 70s, Mom really took the lead in raising us as children. My dad was a little bit more intellectual, and she made sure we had the balance of both education and lots of other activities, including being willing to do things like toss a ball with us outside and making sure we had great fun during celebrations, graduations, and holidays. She taught us independence, letting us choose our activities, and at the time we didn't really realize that as we chose different activities as different kids, each of those things would be things my mom would need to then figure out how we'd get to and from those activities. So her having to take the lead in carpooling and arranging and helping us go to our activities, we never realized at the time how much work that really was. And she would make sure we had fun in preparing. She loved hosting people at our home, and she would make it fun for us, helping her with making cookies and cakes for the holidays. As I said, she was in charge of the house, and she had a 40-year adventure in maintaining a home built in 1920 in Glencoe. So when I learned a lot from her, because what I learned is as things break, instead of replacing those things, you can repair them. So to this day, I love fixing things and sewing things, and I learned this from my mom that I do as an adult. My mom and dad never really talked about a work ethic, but we got to see it through their example. My dad worked hard, and I'd like to say I think my mom may have worked even harder trying to keep up with us. Although she gave up her public teaching career to become a full-time mom, she kept very, very busy with us. And then she was a little bit of an entrepreneur. She ended up teaching what was called body education, an exercise class, in our house. And she was pretty popular, and she ended up outgrowing our house and going to the Winnetka Community House to host the business also. Moving forward, after my dad passed away in 2012, I decided to spend more time with my mom, and I would take her to brunch multiple times a month. We tried many breakfast places around Lincolnshire, and we often ordered 2 meals, and then we'd share them both. And we like to try the special because we're wanted always to try something new, and Mom was always up to try a different new food. I would talk about my wife and daughters and work, and she would tell me what's going on in Sedgebrook, what trips she was planning to take, and what other things she really was enjoying. One thing really made her happy, and I consider it a big bonus, when my older brother Brad started joining us for brunch. Mom really would light up when she'd see me and Brad sitting across the table from her at these lunches, and she looked forward very much also to the multiple times a year visit Roger and Angela and their family would make the Chicago area to visit. These were simple pleasures that Mom really enjoyed. In closing, I remember Mom for having a zest for life, setting a great example for us, and always being ready for the next adventure. Thank you, Mom, for everything.
We didn't compare notes, so there's a little bit of overlap, but thank you, and the themes are all important. Mom was a gardener. She tended and cared to her large garden in Glencoe. She had many lovely flowers, including roses, poppies, and peonies. She also planted and grew zucchini and tomatoes. She tried different flowers and vegetables sometimes. Not everything turned out as planned, but that was expected. We were her other garden. She nurtured and supported us in every activity. She knew many of the seeds we planted would not grow or fully bloom, but it was all part of the journey. As the rabbi and Ken mentioned, the four of us each had different activities, different instruments, different sports, different musical activities, and she supported and was fully embraced support for us for every activity. These did not just happen. She found the classes, she found the teachers, and she drove us to every activity and was there for performances and games. She really made birthday parties special with homemade cakes and decorations, and was so proud of our accomplishments at every turn. Although she knew it was important that we develop as individuals, she also made family activities a big priority. Each season brought more togetherness and fun. In the spring, we would go on family bike rides or to Turnbull Woods and later the Botanic Garden. In summer, we would go to Glencoe Beach for swimming and sailing, and she would help decorate our bikes to ride in the 4th of July parade. In fall, we would all go outside and rake leaves together. She would make our costumes for Halloween and take us trick-or-treating. And in winter, everyone would go outside and shovel, but also play in the snow. Every activity brought us closer together and built trust and friendship among us. She tended her garden and nurtured us through the years. The garden grew and blossomed. It was the love she shared that made everything happen. We are lucky to have had such a wonderful mother to support us on life's journey, and will treasure the memories forever.
As the coffin is lowered into the earth, I remind the family that this can be one of the more challenging moments in the funeral process, but also an opportunity for silent reflection on the power of memory, on the power of connection, and what will tie us to this place from now on, this new connection from our lives with someone we loved. And so as the coffin is lowered, I invite us to reflect silently.